Hi. It's room 360. I want to tell you horror stories about traveling. Usually, my buddies are too busy to revel. Or cannot afford to travel to a. I do a lot because I go to a million different places. I took a plane to San Diego for my own. First time by myself. I've visited the majority of the big cities in. San Diego is the only state in California where I wanted to fulfill a lifelong dream of mine. I stayed at a respectable hotel not far from downtown. While checking in, I got to know a guy a little. He approached me in the lobby, older than me. A discussion with me on my location. From the duration of my stay and whether I'd ever visited, it was reportedly his. It was his second visit, and he was by himself. He volunteered to carry my belongings to my room, since he was heading upstairs, for me. In any case, I accepted his offer and am grateful. In an act of kindness, he carried my bags to the lift and proceeded to the second. He placed my bags on the floor of my room, outside my door, and declared it to be excellent. Getting to know me and having a good time here, I thanked him once again, and he noted the hall. I opened the door and placed the bags on the bed and rested for a while. Simply to take a little snooze when I felt. I returned to the lobby after feeling refreshed. And was ready to go outdoors when I was called by the front desk lady above. When we went, she inquired as to what that man had done upstairs, and I informed her that he had just assisted me heading to my room with my bags. Then she alerted me to the fact that that man had been waiting for a while outside the hotel, as she observed him entering. Shortly after I entered, she informed me she had a good feeling he wasn't remaining at the hotel and seeing him. I should avoid him this time around. Was really quite unnerving, and I hope she was incorrect, and he was merely a pleasant individual. However, just to be safe, I would pay attention to her. I ventured out, explored, and enjoyed a day. I returned a couple of hours later to get dressed differently for dinner. A different individual was employed presently at the front desk. I took a brief shower in the hotel room, then changed into new attire and settled down for a little power sleep once more. During this period, someone knocked at the door to my room, then the voice of a man saying, "Housekeeping." Housekeeping wasn't anything I ordered, and it was my first day there. Perhaps they were in the wrong room. I went to look via the door's peephole, and there was nobody in the hallway. That was so weird. Then right away that man from earlier entered my mind. What if he was the one? I went to my place, ignoring the knocks. Phoned to make a request at the main desk. Them if cleaning had been dispatched to my room, and they naturally refused. I therefore requested that someone be dispatched to my space for my personal security, and 5 minutes afterwards, a hotel maid knocked my door. Opened it and graciously described the circumstance to her and expresses gratitude for. I then departed the hotel to head to dinner. I did a city lights night after supper tour and investigated a few of the events parts of the city at night. About 10 o'clock, I returned to the motel room. I approached the person at the front desk and then described what had previously occurred with the man I encountered, whom I was afraid might have pretended to be room service in order to into my room, so I inquired whether she were familiar with any of his descriptions. Strolling into the lobby, and she declined. And she checked to help me feel better. My floor's live surveillance camera. And there was nobody in the hallways, so I thanked her, proceeded to my floor upstairs, and went to my room. After getting undressed, I lay in. Turn on the TV and go to bed so I can fall asleep. Within an hour, I fell asleep to something. Was falling asleep, and I was. The TV's voice was kind of turning into a dream while I'm half asleep. Upon hearing that, I decided to close it. Entered my dream, but I didn't truly awaken until I sensed the mattress began to move because something was applying pressure on the opposing side. I glanced to the other side of me, beside the bed, and I noticed a man wearing a baseball cap and a black-covered mask. He climbed onto the bed and reached for me. Tried to hide my mouth by grabbing me, so I unable to yell, but I was able to fight him off long enough to let forth a bloody scream. Murder. He kept trying to keep my mouth shut, but I continued to struggle and fight just enough time for someone to begin. I yelled for aid as I knocked on the door, and the man must have known this by now. Was no longer going to go his way. He released me, opened the door, and pushed the knocking woman toward the floor, and she watched him sprint down the corridor to the stairwell. The woman entered to check on me. All right, I was in total astonishment after. Through tears. Other people from nearby rooms arrived to check out the hotel-related commotion. Additionally, employees arrived, and the police were called. According to the hotel's video, the male obtained a master key in some way, which let him use the mask to enter my room. And that concealed who he was, but I firmly believe it to be the one who assisted me on the first day with my stuff. I think he was curious about what I was in the room I would return to later. The idea of what he may have done is frightening. This effectively to another individual. I made every effort to savor the remainder of my trip, despite the fact that I had to. Something I'll probably remember for the remainder of my life. The hotel reimbursed me in full throughout my visit, and they provided me with honestly, a different room to stay in. In retrospect, I probably ought to have filed charges against the hotel. Naturally, the hotel also provided all the essential video for the police department that has never been in touch with me to determine who, regrettably, is more most likely indicates that the man was never correctly recognized or apprehended. Overseas. Written by Sophia. Music. This story's events occur at perhaps around 2013 or 2014, a few years ago. To be honest, I can't recall because the narrative is so hazy, and I've finally simply ignored it for years. During Christmas vacation, I was a college freshman going to a New York City University with that. Having said that, I was far from a family that resided in Bulgaria. For those of you who might not be aware of where. In other words, Bulgaria is a little nation near Romania in Eastern Europe and Greece. Bulgaria's reputation for safety and although regulation isn't very good. In fact, this anecdote conflicts with what I was at JFK Airport, perhaps for a few days prior to Christmas Eve, as my initial. It was my intention to surprise my family and Bulgarian friends. The airport was clearly crowded and packed with numerous individuals producing. My trip was much more complicated and challenging. Following hours of baggage weighing for security and awaiting the passage of time, I at last was not moving when the first aircraft to Manhattan was leaving for Istanbul. Around 8 was the time of the first flight. Hours, so I was ready to be a little wretched and hurting for the traditional economical seating configuration. Unfortunately, I was seated next to two men. Just so you know, I'm 5 feet 110 inches. Something that didn't make the woman pound. Nor is it any better. These two men were probably well over a foot taller than me and could easily overwhelm me. The man on the right to me was relatively quiet, black hair, glasses, and low-key ripped. The guy in the left to me, however, frightened me out. He would occasionally mumble to himself silently, and he would claw at his flesh, sometimes even nudging his arm near to mine. I took note of the guy to the left of me and tried my best to have a decent 8-hour flight. The only thing keeping me productive was the reality that I will be in my native nation in less than 48 hours. However, this productivity was reduced brief while I'd be taking care of myself, perhaps working or enjoying some music. And the man on my left would be really glaring at me directly. I attempted to brush it off. Perhaps he has a impairment that prevented him from interacting with others. Clues, but over time I began to doubt that. In the course of the flight, I was viewing American Horror's second season. The man started talking to me about the story, questioning why I was viewing a program that the mentally ill are badly represented, killers and the like. I hurriedly and anxiously asked him if he required any assistance, as it's unsuitable for sporadic disruption. A stranger who is taking care of themselves. Company. American Horror Story Eyes season. Was viewing Asylum, which depicts ruthless killers and mad individuals. The man looked at me out of a mental hospital directly into the eye and stated, to be honest, I simply believe it's up how everyone believes that those who skin others are. I mean, aren't we all insane? Like as. I started to panic in my head and asked, who the devil was I sitting next to, myself? Did anybody else hear that? I laughed, dismissing it as though I was left alone for the remainder of the flight. Was extremely afraid, and I thought requesting a seat that is available that might have been accessible from the rear of the aircraft. Nevertheless, the aircraft reached an conclude, and we reached Istanbul. I gathered my belongings as fast as I could and escorted me from the aircraft as I now hope I could say as soon as possible. That is where the story stops, but regrettably it doesn't. I had a good rest of Christmas, but I'm still thinking about what the man said. Similar to a bell. As January drew near, I started packing. Once more to return to New York. I was organizing my tote bag and discarding anything ancient that I might have crammed within there from my travels when I discovered a repulsive message that must have been sneaked in while I was asleep. I would like to see what it said. How you appear beneath the surface. I wish I had taken a photo of it since evidence, as just 1 month after. In February, a news report that I received that from my younger sister essentially discussed the same exact. The man I flew with was sent to jail for several rape allegations. Attempted kidnapping and attempted rape. First-degree murder and abduction in Istanbul. I became really ill after reading that article. Stomach, and to be honest, that entire my experience prompted me to simply remain at home during a couple years throughout the holidays. Music. Written by Marcus. In order to avoid the cold throughout the 2018 winter weather, Claire, my girlfriend, and I took a week off from work so that we can attend a lovely Mexican beach resort where the weather and the crystal clear blue water was wonderful. The resort was quite reasonably priced for an all-inclusive 7-day stay. Package included 3 pools and a buffet. There were 1,000,000 pubs on the beach and entertainment center and numerous groups. Travels. We intended to stay there for a whole. We had a lot planned for the first week. We spent a few days lounging about the resort, making use of the endless beverages bundle. The resort's immediate surroundings were many roads with a scenic appearance and a lot of jungle. We therefore boarded a private transport on the 3rd day at the closest rental car location. Our shuttle driver cautioned us against go too far away from the shore since there are many dangerous places. There were none when we leased a Ford Fiesta. Precisely any Camaros or Mustangs at this location for rental. The location of the vehicle rental was in a small city, 5 miles or so up the road from the. There was essentially this one long resort road that passed by several resorts. Additionally, there were miles of jungle and sporadic tiny towns. We traveled south on the highway till we came to an end. Upon arriving in Tulum, the city itself was less desirable than I had anticipated, given that many of my friends were constantly expressing a desire to visit there. After passing through the Tulum region, we discovered a gravel track back up north that led to a jungle region and chose to simply drive through it and see its path. It was just rainforest on both sides of us, most likely for miles. We traveled along this broad dirt road, taking in the view and a little experience off-roading, but Claire appeared to believe that we shouldn't be on a rental on a gravel road like this out of fear of contaminating it, and I consented, so we made a 3-point turn and began to heading back toward the main road. Eventually, these people stopped us. 3 men emerged from the forest, going out on the road. At the same time, we both said, "Oh no," being aware that this could cause problems. I stopped the vehicle and lowered a little of the window as one of the men approached it and began to talk in Spanish. "No hablo español," I said. Began to heat up little. Another man showed up to Claire's. I instructed her not to knock on the window. My Windows guide began to lower it, yelling, "Money, money," and I noticed a single man continued walking in front of the vehicle, also to my window, and he made I took the knife from his right pocket and walked on the throttle, and the vehicle sprang into motion. The 3 men ran and screamed after us, but they were definitely unable to flee. Our hearts were beating more quickly than an automobile throats from that interaction, which I didn't allow, increasing the gas until we exited the dirt road, so we didn't actually wish to travel by car anymore. Therefore we brought the vehicle to the parking area of the resort and left it there. We weren't ready to return it, particularly considering that the rentals there were very inexpensive anyhow. The following day, following a conversation with some of the resort employees who suggested a stunning neighboring cenote to, after checking out, we took the vehicle to another dirt route that looks similar and is quite near the resort. We did what the employees instructed and drove to the very end of the dirt road, and then we noticed a sign for. We located the cenotes without any problems, and we were alone in this place. Surprisingly, there were no other automobiles. We proceeded down this path after following the indications. Lovely scenic walkway. It was a really tranquil encounter that regrettably have to be destroyed when we began to feel as if we were being observed. I'm not saying that humans possess a sixth sense. Really, we heard rustling and footsteps coming from everywhere in the Jungle, I suggested that we just keep strolling. We kept following the indications and left. One day, a man approached us out of the blue, speaking Spanish once more. And I said once more, no hablo español. He began to try speaking in English, and I perceived him as seeking to get us to accompany him that Claire and I would follow him to the cenote. Looked anxiously at one another, and we accompanied the man who was guiding us in a different manner than we were at first going. It appears that we weren't paying attention. The indicators no longer. Claire gave me a shoulder tap and then indicated the man's rear pocket. The handle of a big knife was present in. Whispered to her from his back pocket too. Then encouraged her to begin running. And I trailed closely behind. The man became aware and fled. Thank God he was slow, yet he came after us. We quickly outran him and succeeded returning to the vehicle, and initially I believed he would no longer pursue us, but as soon as we entered the vehicle, and 3 individuals came out of the route we just took and attempted. They began by opening the automobile doors, striking the glass in an attempt to shatter the windows open. Prior to any of them actually shattering, we had already started shifting the windows. I wanted to cry because Claire was crying so hard. Additionally, 2 days in a row, we formally detested this location that we brought. Returning the vehicle to the rental store and fortunately, there were no dings or everything from getting battered on a few stains from dirt. We returned to the resort via shuttle from there, and we remained at the resort once more before departing a few days later for the airport. We informed the resort employees of the attack in order to alert the visitors. We haven't returned to Mexico since, but to be honest, I don't think we ever will. Even in what was meant to be a more secure location around the resorts for 2 consecutive days, we barely avoided being attacked and robbed.